Doctor Who Series 10, Pietro Capaldo. Today we are ranking all 14 episodes of Doctor Who Series 10, including the surrounding Christmas specials, that being Return of Dr. Mysterio and Twice Upon a Time. We've been doing this for the last 9 days ahead of what is today, the 60th anniversary of Doctor Who. So pour one out for the boys, the fellas, the unknown amount of actors who have now played the Doctor on screen, going back all the way to the 23rd of November, 1963, with the airing of An Unearthly Child. Of course, we've been surrounded by the 60th anniversary specials, the 3 episodes that have just come out surrounding right now. The time that I'm recording this is not the anniversary day. So if my excitement is not quite there, I do apologize. I actually don't know the release date of the episodes yet. And so if there still is one for you to see, I'm sorry. If they've already come to pass, good, because I will be ranking those coming up soon, probably next week sometime. But if you want my rankings on the previous 9 seasons of new Doctor Who, the revived series since 2005, go back and watch. There should be links to the other videos at the end of this video with my Doctor Who playlist, or if you just want to watch them right now, go check that out on the channel, the Doctor Who playlist. I also have a timeline detailing every single episode of Doctor Who in chronological time order, from the beginning of the universe detailed in the show to the end of the universe detailed in the show. I will be updating that with the 3 new episodes as well, so stay tuned for that. But today, we are talking about Series 10. Now, this aired in the spring of my senior year of high school. I remember when it aired because, for a reason I will not disclose, I did not have my phone because it was taken away because I did something bad. So I had to watch it 2 days later. It was very sad, very disappointed. I actually kind of liked the first episode. I liked the beginning. A lot of people really like Series 10. For many, I would say upwards of 45% of Doctor Who fans see Series 10 as Peter Capaldi's best series. It's where Moffat got things back on the rails after the failure that was Series 8 or Series 9. I actually prefer Series 9. It's my favorite of the 3 Capaldi series. That's a little bit of a spoiler for this. But I still liked Series 10. I liked what they were going for with just kind of this refresh. The first episode is called The Pilot, literally trying to be a kind of a secondary revamp pilot for the show. And then, of course, they would do the exact same thing with the Chibnall era, so ignore it. But I like the tone of Series 10. I really do. I like that they kind of have this new feel to it. It took them 2 years before they were able to do Series 10. Between Series 9 and 10, they did 2 Christmas specials. We talked about one of them yesterday. One of them started December of 2016, and then a few months later, of course, then we got Series 10, ending with the Christmas special end of 2017, which sees the regeneration of the 12th Doctor into the 13th, as well as somewhat of a regeneration between the 1st and 2nd Doctors. So, with that being said, 14 episodes, we are ranking them today. We are starting with the only episode from Series 10, double-checking my list, that I have in F tier. The Lie of the Land. This episode is not good. I actually am somewhat sympathetic to the Monks trilogy. It kills the pacing of the season, is the one thing that I really don't like about the Monks trilogy. But the first 2 episodes, even the second one, like, some people really don't like the Monks trilogy and hate all of the episodes. The majority of people seem to like the first episode in the Monks trilogy. I actually like the second episode too. Everybody hates the third. It's kind of got this 1984 feel to it. There's too much weight on Pearl Mackie's shoulders, and I don't know if it's her performance in correlation with the script. The script isn't very good, and her delivery of the script is not good. And I don't want to say that Pearl Mackie can't deliver things, because she absolutely kills it in the finale. Pearl Mackie is phenomenal in the 2-part finale of Series 10. She does very poorly in this episode specifically. The plot is resolved instantaneously. This, despite being the 3rd part of a 3-part trilogy, this should have been a 2-parter. The things that are proposed in this episode and encapsulated timeline-wise and just plot-wise in this episode's very rushed. This episode's very half-baked. This episode doesn't give us the stakes and payoffs that were built up to in the first two parts, if that makes any sense. I think the Doctor is very unlikable in this episode, even though most of it is as a ploy. I think Nardole is a little too comedic. I love Nardole, to be honest with you. I don't love Matt Lucas as an actor, but I think his performance in Doctor Who as Nardole, specifically in this series, is very good. I know some people who really hate Nardole. I don't mind him. I think the moments where Matt Lucas is allowed to step out and act and be a genuinely serious actor. He's great in the finale. He's great in Extremis. I like him. I don't think he's very well utilized in this episode. I think the monks are made to look like absolute words I shouldn't say on camera. Just poor villains, poorly written, poorly realized. I don't think they were very good in the previous episode either. I think their performances are very wooden, very poor, and most of that is the makeup. I don't think they were realized conceptually very well, and the threat doesn't feel great. The resolution to the plot with Bill using her memories of her mom that she has constructed to send off the monks, I think, is very poor. And then the fact that they just kind of fly their pyramid away at the end and everybody forgets about it. Genuinely, it kind of feels like In the Forest of the Night from series 7 or from series 8, excuse me. It's not a good episode. People will defend it. That's fine. I'm not defending it. I think it's an F tier episode. I was brutally disappointed with it. I think the Monks trilogy kills the pacing of series 10, and I think that this episode bears a lot of that weight on its shoulders. Let's move up then to D tier. Where are we going in D tier here? I've heard this described as the most forgettable episode in Doctor Who's history. I don't really disagree. The Eaters of Light. This is the one you'll recall takes place in Scotland in like the 2nd century. The Roman Legion and the Picts going at each other, and then there's these kind of almost like lizard, like Komodo dragon type creatures that just like suck the light out of people. That's kind of they're a cool monster. Visually, it's very well realized. I think the direction in this episode is actually very good. I think the CGI on the Ghostbusters portal thing isn't great. Everything to do with like the portal, I don't love. The dialogue in this episode is really weird. There is kind of a bizarre interaction between Bill and the Romans talking about like homosexuality and bisexuality that's handled very weird. Bill mentions the fact that she's not straight, and then the Romans are just like, oh, that's like cool, yeah, none of us are straight, which like is played for laughs, and I think that they were going for a more like homosexuality is not bad, everybody, and like it's been a thing for a long time, despite the fact that like historically around this time in the Roman Empire, the emperors were very likely doing it, like the higher ups, but someone like a soldier and someone in the lower class of the Roman Empire, like it wouldn't have been a thing, and it wouldn't have been something to brag about necessarily, and the interaction itself is weird, coupled with the fact that there's that weird historical anecdote. I think the actress, the actors with the Picts are not very well realized. They don't deliver their lines very well. They're a little too manic. I think the Doctor does very good in this episode. I think Nardole's fun in this episode. The beginning and end of this episode are kind of weird. Just like the sound of sound of drums, literally. And the crow at the beginning and end of this episode. It foreshadows, well, not foreshadows Face the Raven, because this is a different season, but it harkens back to Face the Raven, which I like. I like Face the Raven. Go check out yesterday's episode. It's a very forgettable episode. Like, this is one you could easily skip and you'd miss absolutely nothing. Let's move up then to another one that's somewhat forgettable, but it has more impact on the series for the sake of the episode's ending. And that is, let me find it here, Empress of Mars. So, I mentioned yesterday, was it yesterday or the day before, I can't stand Mark Gatiss. Like, as a writer, as a Doctor Who writer specifically. This is one of those, it's, in my opinion, like, despite where I have it ranked, I think it's one of his better scripts. Genuinely, I think the writing in this is great. He has this weird obsession with Victorian times. Like, I don't know what it is. He wrote, off the top of my head, I'm trying to think here. He wrote, did he write Crimson Horror? He certainly wrote Unquiet Dead. And now I'm spacing out. He's written several Victorian era episodes. And I don't love most of them. This one is very well realized. The set is very plain. Like, they have a single set, but the set itself is very well decorated, very well realized. The world building in this episode is very good. I think the script is fine. What I don't like are a lot of the performances. I don't mind the script, but it does still have its flaws. Like, there's some inconsistencies with it. I think there are too many character beats that are trying to be touched upon. A lot of these side characters have motivations that are not integral to the plot, but they're thrown in there and made to act like a big deal, like the hanging of the captain, or like the past lives of these soldiers, that sort of thing. Friday's relationship with his Empress, that sort of thing. It's kind of a mess of an episode from a delivery standpoint. Still, genuinely, I think it's one of Mark Gatiss' better scripts. But the reason I say that it's impactful for the rest of the season is it based on the actions of the TARDIS, Nardole is forced to go back to Earth and take Missy out of the vault, which then sets up the two-part finale. So you could honestly be forgiven for thinking that Empress of Mars goes straight into the finale, because it fits really well, despite the fact that Eaters of Light just kind of sits in the middle of those. So I always forget the order of these. And the pacing of this episode isn't helped by the fact that we just come out of the Monks trilogy. That kind of ruins the expectations of this episode. The juxtaposition of Victorian times on Mars and present time on Earth and the space satellite and that sort of thing is a little weird. I don't love the beginning of this episode. The ending I do like, but I don't think it's that great of an episode. Sitting in D tier for me here. Let me take a sip. I had a rager with the boys last night. My head is killing me, bruv. No, I just have a headache. Let's do Knock Knock, also in D tier. So not a good start for season 10 in my rankings. It's a lot of low episodes here. Knock Knock, very inconsequential episode for Doctor Who. It's the one where Bill moves into a house and gets roasted for liking Lil Mix. Yeah, Lil Mix. I think all of her friends are very weirdly acted. There's some weird performances in this episode. The Doctor is fun. David Suchet is fantastic as the villain. I think the CGI is a little weird. I think the realization of Eliza, I think that's almost entirely makeup. I don't think there's any CGI in Eliza, like the wooden lady at the end of the episode. I think that's fantastically realized. I think the tone of this episode is very good. The beginning tone is kind of weird. But once you settle into the house, now keep in mind, this is the same house that they filmed Blink at, which is kind of a weird little production quirk. But it's supposed to take place in Bristol. I don't know where I was going with that train of thought, but this is the only episode we really get of Bill's home life. We get Bill's home life a little bit in the first episode. We see it a little bit more with the interactions with her foster mother. And then we get her dating life. But Bill's home life specifically is not really explored at all, despite the fact that most of the season kind of takes place in and around present Earth, especially with the Monks trilogy. This is another very forgettable episode, but it's one of the better of the forgettable episodes, if that makes any sense. Very inconsequential. Doesn't take itself too seriously. It kind of, when surrounded by... Smile isn't super serious, but it deals with very serious subject matter. The pilot takes itself very seriously. Thin Ice takes itself very seriously. Oxygen takes itself very seriously. Extremis takes itself very seriously. The fact that Knock Knock fits kind of right in the middle of those, it feels very out of place, and it tonally doesn't fit with the rest of this season. For me, it sits in D tier. Let's move up then. I think that's all. Let's go to C tier. Bottom of C tier, Return of Dr. Mysterio. Now this is one a lot of people hate. Some people consider this the worst Christmas special of all time. I disagree. I think Doctor Widow in the Wardrobe is the worst Christmas special of all time. Return of Doctor Mysterio, I remember watching live. It was the only episode of Doctor Who that aired in 2016. I was trapped in a hotel, I think in Sioux Falls, because my flight to Phoenix had been canceled. And I was sitting Christmas Eve in a hotel room with my dad and my brother just watching Doctor Who. It was fine. It follows along from where we left off with River Song. So the Doctor doesn't remember Clara, but he has kind of this gap in his head from Clara. And then he just lost River Song, and so he is grieving. This episode is widely disliked for the fact that it kind of plays on the superhero trope. This aired the same year as like Batman v Superman and Captain America Civil War, so it plays with that trope. It uses a lot of pop culture references that, as of me recording, are now 7 years too late. I think Justin Chatwin? I think his performance is very good. I can't remember the name of the lead female. I think she's very good. There are a couple really, really funny lines in this episode. The one of my favorite bits in this episode is when the Ghost or Grant stops the ship from crashing, and then the head bad guy, whatever his name, I'm not even going to go. I don't even know if he's named in the episode, but the head of Harmony Shoal comes in and says something along the lines of, he points a gun at the Doctor and he goes, it's not, this isn't over, Doctor. And the Doctor just points a sonic screwdriver at him and goes, yeah, it is. And the gun explodes in his hand. And I think that's one of the funniest one-liners Peter Capaldi has in his entire reign in the show. This episode is very forgettable, very skippable. I think Nardole really comes into his own as a character in this episode. I think the Doctor is very good. Like I said, I like Justin Chatwin. I like the chemistry they have. It's played a little melodramatic, a little soap opera-y. It's a little too childish, if that makes any sense. So Doctor Who, starting with the Moffat era, had really been starting to get serious with its subject material and tone, and more so for adult or more family entertainment than children entertainment, as had been kind of the early mid Russell T Davies era. This feels like a step back from that tone. We got it a little bit with Husbands of River Song, and then we get it here. I like it. The more I watch it, the more I do like it, and the more it kind of sneaks up in my rankings, but it still is a very forgettable episode. It's still teenage consequences and a little bit of a will they, won't they love story. It's a lot better than The Lodger, in my opinion. I think it's better than The Lodger. Is it better than The Lodger? I actually have to check real quick. Yeah. It's a little better than Lodger on my rankings, at least. I like the fact that it handles will they, won't they romance better than The Lodger. But sits in C tier. That's all I'm saying about Return of Dr. Mysterio. Let's move up then to Twice Upon a Time. Twice Upon a Time kind of sucks. I'm not going to lie. It's a very unnecessary episode. The only reason that Twice Upon a Time exists is because Chris Chibnall made it very clear before he started as showrunner that he wasn't going to do a Christmas special to start off his era. And so instead of having Jodie Whittaker have her first episode be the 2017 Christmas special, it was going to be in 2018. Stephen Moffat didn't want to not have a Christmas special. He didn't want to leave that hole in Doctor Who, and so he created this special as kind of an afterthought. That's why there's no villain in this episode. That's why a lot of the plot points feel very recycled from The Doctor Falls. That's why there's the inclusion of the first Doctor to kind of give it something of essence. And then, of course, Chris Chibnall would cancel Christmas specials anyways for the rest of his tenure. But this episode, like I said, there's no villain. There's really no plot. It's the Doctor coming to terms with his own regeneration. He doesn't want to regenerate. He has lost faith in the universe. That is handled so much better in The Doctor Falls. And the ending of The Doctor Falls is lessened because of the way that they had to rewrite the ending of The Doctor Falls to go into Twice Upon a Time. The portrayal of the first Doctor, I think David Bradley's portrayal itself is very good. I think the writing is horrible. I think it turns the first Doctor into a very dislikable character. The first Doctor was grumpy in his first season, and then he wasn't. Go back and watch Classic Who. The first Doctor is a very different character to the one that we see on screen here. So I'm not blaming David Bradley. I think David Bradley is a phenomenal actor, does very well with the material he's given. They turned the first Doctor into something that he wasn't for the sake of cheap laughs. I don't think Pearl Mackie was necessary in this episode. They just kind of included her to add this sort of mystery. I think the handling of Clara was very poor, both in writing and just the execution itself. I have said before, I'll say it again, the biggest villain to Clara's character in Doctor Who is Jenna Coleman's agent. And we see that again here because Jenna Coleman wasn't even on set at the same time that they filmed this scene. They filmed her in front of a green screen. They added a very, very bad filter behind her to try to make her seem kind of angelic. Her line delivery isn't great. I'm not really sure what Jenna Coleman... I don't know. It's not good. It's not good. I wish they would not have included Clara. You knew they were going to. You absolutely knew they were going to, but I wish they hadn't. I wish the Doctor would have remembered Clara somehow else, but the way they handled it here is not good. I don't mind Mark Gatiss as an actor. He's really bad in this episode. He's horrible in this episode. What else is there to say? It's middle tier. It's like, why do I have it as high as C tier? As if I'm roasting it, is the question. I think I like Peter Capaldi's portrayal. Is part of it. The monologue is too long, but it's still very good. I like the plot material that it deals with. I like the inner conflict that it deals with and explores. It kind of had to have a plot itself. The plot points in this episode are not great, but I like the character motivations of the 12th Doctor in this episode. I'm leaving it in C tier. That's where I like it. That's my defense of where I've placed it. Let's move up then to Pyramid at the End of the World. I mentioned I like this episode. I like it a lot more than most people. I don't love anything to do with the monks in this episode. Did we lose me? Are we back? Let me double check. Make sure we are still filming. Hello? Okay, we're good. All right, going on 23 minutes. All right, sorry about that. My camera just shut off for a quick second. Pyramid at the End of the World. I hate everything that happens in Turkmenistan. First of all, I hate the fact that there's a country called Turkmenistan that they used last season in the Zygon invasion, and I hate that they brought it back for this episode. I hate everything to do with the Doctor and Bill and the United Nations and the monks in this episode. What I do like about this episode, believe it or not, is all of the factory stuff. Like, genuinely, all of the laboratory stuff, I like. I really like this idea of a human error, just like a subtle human error that could happen to any one of us. I mentioned, like, my head is killing me today. If I were to sit down at my job and be typing numbers all day, there is a very likely chance that I would not get it right. I've probably called an episode incorrectly in this video. Like, it's a very human error, and the fact that that could happen and create such a mass disaster. I mean, this was before the pandemic. Like this episode does a very good job of creating a very sudden, very real threat to humanity, and I genuinely buy it. Like, some people don't buy it that this could be created in a biomedical lab sort of thing. Like, I like it. I like all the drama. I like the performances of the side characters. But like I said, the thing that, like, that would be a B tier episode for me. The rest of it, that's only about 20 minutes of plot, maybe even less. But everything else about this, all of the stuff with the generals, all of the stuff with making peace with the monks, I can't stand it. Pearl Mackie's performance isn't very good in this episode. I think Peter Capaldi's fun. I think his chemistry with the one Doctor in the lab is very fun. I do like the ending. I think it's a very fitting ending. There are very few times that we get multi-episode consequences in Doctor Who, and we see that in episodes 5, 6, and 7. I don't mind it. I understand why people don't like it. For me, because of the fact that I like the laboratory stuff, that's why it sits as high as C tier. But otherwise, it's a pretty forgettable episode. Let's move up then to B tier. Smile. It speaks emoji. This episode is gorgeous. First of all, the location, it's the city of Arts and Sciences. Is that what it's called? It's in Spain. If it's in Portugal, I'm so sorry, but I'm almost certain it's in Spain. They filmed Orphan 55 basically at the same spot, and it looks so much better in this episode. The CGI, the shot composition in this episode is very, very good. There's a little too much color correction on certain spots. I don't love anything to do with the emoji bots. I think that's very poor. I think the resolution in this episode is very poor as well. But everything else about this episode, I think the acting is great. I think the performances of the secondary cast, despite the fact that we don't really know any of the characters, I think is very good. I think the reactions that the characters have and the motivations that they have are very good. I like the idea of a world designed by and like the world itself being robots is a very cool concept. I think the Doctor's performance is very good. I think the chemistry with Pearl Mackie is very good in this episode. If it weren't for certain plot beats and the fact that it's just kind of the emoji bot, it's not bad, but it's also not good. Like, it's one of those things, they put it in to capitalize on modern pop culture, that sort of thing. Obviously, as of me recording, we're still using emojis, so it's not like it's a very niche timed reference. But it's one of those, like, did it have to be? Like, could this episode have worked without that inclusion? Absolutely, and I think it would have been better for it. Plot resolution, not so great. But everything else about this episode, I do very much like. It sits for me bottom of B tier. Let's move up then to the pilot. Pilot's a decent episode. I'm putting it in B tier. So fall of 2016, before the Christmas special, we were introduced to Bill. And a lot of people really liked Bill from the off, Pearl Mackie's performance. This wasn't the first episode she filmed. I can't remember which one was. But she had, by the time that they filmed the pilot, been able to figure out enough of her own performance in the role where she was able to just kind of have this chemistry and charisma to her character by the time that they filmed this episode. And then they would crop it and basically do a character introduction, which they released in the fall of 2016. This episode is very inconsequential plot-wise. It sets up Bill as a character. It sets up Bill's eventual resurrection, which we'll talk about when we get to the Doctor Falls. But it's basically just a big Terminator type chase through the middle of this episode, and we get to see fantastical worlds. I wish we'd get a little more out of the world building, even when we're jumping between planets. I think that's cool. I think it's something that the Chibnall era also tried to do and didn't really capitalize on either. I think this is a very good looking episode, despite maybe it being a little too color corrected. I mentioned yesterday in the video that, like, the Peter Capaldi era has a serious problem with color correction. Very few episodes do it well. This is another example of this. This episode is very blue for the most part, especially all of the stuff that happens at night. It has a very weird filter to it. The scenes are shot very similarly of the university. The nighttime scenes of the university are shot very similarly to the shots in Listen back in Series 8. And the shots in Listen actually look very good because they're not overly corrected. I like the whole concept of the Doctor being a lecturer. We talked yesterday about there's an issue with the 12th Doctor where long term, yes, he has this character arc where he goes from a very, very grumpy man into kind of this midlife crisis and then ending at just figuring it out, kind of settling himself on where he wants to be as the Doctor. The problem is we don't get a continuous arc. We get a little bit of an arc, and then it's interrupted, and there's a vast change into Series 9. Same thing with Series 10. The Doctor's character is very different between, specifically, it starts a little bit between Wedding of River Song and Return of Dr. Mysterio, but very specifically between Return of Dr. Mysterio and the pilot. The Doctor's a very different character. Now, they write it very well into this season. They talk about the Doctor has been at the university for 70 years. He's had time to mature, develop. He's been stuck in one location. He's probably been traveling for a very long time. But he's a very different character. But I think Peter Capaldi's performance is very good. I think his chemistry with Pearl Mackie is very good. Somewhat inconsequential episode for the plot, but otherwise does well. It's a decent opener. And I put it middle of B tier. Let's go to Thin Ice. A lot of people really like Thin Ice. I'm not one of them. One problem I have. Now this is I want to be very careful when I say that. Like very careful when I say this. I'm not defending racism, but the Doctor punching a racist without successful repercussions feels very out of character for the Doctor. The Doctor is almost always nonviolent, except when he has to be. A moment of casual racism that doesn't result in the Doctor winning the situation feels like a moment that is out of character for the Doctor. Now, is it iconic for the Doctor? Is it iconic for the 12th Doctor and Peter Capaldi in this era? Yes, it is. However, to me, that specific moment, like I said, strictly for the fact that it doesn't result in a success for the Doctor. Morally, in our eyes, is it a success? Yes, but in terms of the episode and the plot and where they're going, it feels out of character. I like the world building. I like the portrayal here. One thing that feels out of character for the Doctor, too, is he lets the kids die. We see a moment, at least one of the kids drowns, and the Doctor does nothing to try to save the kid, which also feels out of character. So the Doctor feels a little off in this episode. I think Pearl Mackie is fine in this episode. I think their chemistry is good. I like the concept. The visualization, the CGI in this episode isn't great. I'll say. I think this episode is also overly color corrected. It's fine. I think the resolution is a little weird. But all in all, it's a fine episode. Like, to me, it's a B tier episode. To some people, it's an S tier episode, and it's the best episode of the season. It's not to me. It's absolutely not to me. There's too many inconsistencies with the Doctor's character. Pearl Mackie's performance is not quite up to par with what I want for an S tier episode. Otherwise, very good. I like the costuming. I really like, just like I said, the set design. It really feels like pre-Victorian. Who would have been the king in 1814? That still would have been George the Third. I think George the Third. It might have been George the Fourth, but Georgian England. Just you feel it. It's very well realized on screen. Anyways, that's all for Thin Ice. Let's move up to Oxygen. Oxygen I also have in B tier. Why do I have Oxygen in B tier? Good question. To a lot of people, the majority of people I've found, this is their favorite episode of Series 10. Why do I have it in B tier? I think it's a very unrealized episode. There is a very cool concept going on here with the idea of late-stage corporate capitalism resulting in human death because humans are inefficient. That's a very cool concept. What I don't like about its execution here partly comes down to the resolution of the episode. The Doctor basically tricks he kind of, it's like he threatens the base and says that he will destroy a profitable mining company if the suits don't allow their users to live, is kind of the resolution of this episode, which, yes, is a good solution as long as the Doctor stays there to enforce that. As soon as the Doctor leaves, what's to stop the station from not killing its hosts again? I think the horror elements of this episode are done very well. I think the visuals are very good. The makeup is fantastic. I think the concept of the Doctor being blind is very good. The Doctor is very, very well realized in this episode. Like, the 12th Doctor is very obviously a serious socialist, which, like, fits with Doctor Who. Doctor Who's always been a left-leaning show. This season is probably the most overtly left leaning. And a lot of people, it's so funny. We'll talk about it more with the Chibnall era. The Chibnall era, despite what people perceive as being super woke or super left leaning, it's really not. The Chibnall era is almost too safe. Like, this series 10 is very, very obviously the most politically heavy season of Doctor Who, and that plays into Stephen Moffat's leanings, it plays into Peter Capaldi's leanings, and their combination in their final season together portrays a very left-leaning series, and that is most obviously portrayed in this episode. What I don't like about the late-stage capitalism thing is at the end of the episode, with the conclusion, it almost feels like this episode is satisfied with itself when it says capitalism bad. It doesn't talk about corporation capitalism. It doesn't talk about human rights within capitalism. There are a lot of nuances to the argument that Doctor Who is trying to make with this episode that they just simply gloss over. They're basically trying to tell us that capitalism as a whole is bad, whereas and of course they would, because it's a left-leaning show. They would never strictly say, well, communism bad. If they were to do an episode about communism being bad, they would go into the nuances and say, well, no, communism is only bad because certain people take advantage of the fact that there isn't a strong enough central core, or if there is too strong of a central core, then the government takes over and it becomes kind of fascistic. With capitalism in this specific episode, Doctor Who is avoiding the nuances so that Stephen Moffat can basically say that all of capitalism is bad, despite the fact that he's been made a millionaire because of it. It's frustratingly simple with the way that it portrays capitalism in this episode. It is why, for me, it drops down. I like that they went for it. I genuinely do like that there are serious social and economic issues that Doctor Who really goes for in this episode, and Doctor Who has never hidden its biases on its sleeve. I say that as someone who doesn't always agree with the stuff that Doctor Who portrays and its portrayal of religion, and long story. But I like that they went for it, and I like that they committed to it. To me, it's not even an A-tier episode, simply because of the fact that they gloss over too many things that could have made this a very, very grand episode. Kerblam is no, it's not. Let's move up then to, do we have any others in B tier? No, let's move up to A tier. World Enough in Time, Dr. Falls. No, let's do Extremis first. I think Extremis is below World Enough in Time and Dr. Falls. Extremis. Some people like this episode so much that they don't want to consider it part of the Monks trilogy, even though it literally sets up the remainder of the Monks trilogy. It's basically like saying Utopia is not the first of a three-parter for the Series 3 finale because it takes place elsewhere, or it doesn't directly have the same villain, that sort of thing. I understand the argument. A better argument would be saying that Face the Raven isn't like a part of a three-part finale for the end of Series 9. But Extremis is well and above better in quality, in my opinion, and most people's opinion, than the latter two parts of the Monk trilogy. The Monks really aren't a direct threat in this episode. What is a direct threat is the fact that the world that the characters are living in is created by the monks, and they basically have to escape the Matrix. It's done very well. The writing of this episode is fantastic. The set design in this episode is fantastic. The CGI is very good. The mystery in this episode is very good. The integration of the Doctor's blindness is done very, very tastefully. The one thing, like I said, I don't like, I've never, this is me being like as a religious person, I've never loved Doctor Who's handling of religion. I think Doctor Who handles religion very poorly in the way that it portrays religious people or people who have belief systems as inferior to people who don't. I'm okay with pokes and jabs. This episode actually does it very well. fun little jabs at the Catholic Church. Like that's fine. But like it doesn't inherently, what I like about this episode from a religious perspective is it doesn't inherently diminish the idea of a belief system as other episodes do. You talk about the God complex as being a big example of that. Matt Smith's era was filled with a lot of moments where they were critical of people with belief systems, Church of the Papal Mainframe, that sort of thing. They like with capitalism, they don't want to address the intricacies of religion. They just want to put an umbrella over it and say that all religion is bad. I think this episode handles belief very well. Very well. It handles the mass suicide of learning the truth very tastefully. I think that the scene at CERN is one of the best scenes in the entire season. I really like the table smashing number reading scene. I like the stuff with the doctor at the end of the episode. I think the portrayals of all of our main characters are done very well. I think all of the stuff in the Vatican, despite the Catholic jokes, I think it's done very, very tastefully. It's done very, very well. I like Extremis. It doesn't age as well with how the rest of the trilogy falls off. It sets up a huge threat with the monks. It really does make the monks seem threatening. We don't know anything about them. We don't know what they are. We don't know how many of them there are. The trilogy falls off the rails, and that is to Extremis' detriment. But the episode itself, despite being mostly set up, is a very, very good episode on its own. That being said, there are two episodes that I find better. And actually, most people have this in the opposite order. I am putting Dr. Falls second and World Enough in Time first. I think World Enough in Time is one of the best looking Doctor Who episodes in the Capaldi era. I think there are enough problems with the Dr. Falls. Despite the Dr. Falls being a near perfect episode, I think there are enough problems with it, specifically at the beginning of the Dr. Falls, that drop it from S tier to me, and even drop it before, or drop it below World Enough in Time. World Enough in Time, to me, when World Enough in Time aired, I loved it. Like, absolutely loved it. I still love it. I like certain moments of it a little less. I love Michelle Gomez in this episode. I think her portrayal of Missy is her best portrayal of Missy. One thing I didn't mention in this episode, or in this video, is we get the return of Missy by way of the vault, right? I think Michelle Gomez's portrayal of Missy and her portrayal of the Master finally coming to terms and guilt with the actions of their past, I think it's handled very well. I think Michelle Gomez does very well with the material she's given. I think she is really not just funny, but does a great job here. Like, is able to match the tone of Missy's comedy from the past mixed with the seriousness of the situation. I think her being Doctor Who at the beginning of the episode is done very well when she drops the line where she she goes, "Don't be a bitch." I like every time I watch this episode and forget about that line and I hear her drop it, like I burst out laughing because it's such a, I don't know that word was ever uttered in Doctor Who before. And her delivery is just so deadpan. It's just like, don't be a bitch. It's like, okay, like I'm paying attention now. This is great. I think the threat at the beginning, the death of Bill, is handled very, very tastefully. I think all of the stuff at the bottom of the ship is realized very well. Visually, it's stunning. The Cybermen are the best that they have ever... Hot take. The best the Cybermen have ever been is in this episode. The Cybermen are scary. The horror is handled very well. The atmosphere of this episode is fantastic. I actually... When they leave... So when Bill is shot and goes down to the bottom of the ship, I actually wish we would never see the top of the ship again. I get why they did it. It's to give the viewer a sense of the time dilation between the two. But I don't like any of the stuff in the cockpit after Bill is shot. That being said, World Enough in Time is a great episode. It's lacking something. I'm not a huge fan of John Sims Master, which I know is a controversial take amongst Doctor Who fans. I don't really love any of the new Who Masters, to be honest with you. Um, I don't know how I feel about John Sims Master. Genuinely, the more I watch it, his return in this episode was spoiled, which was a mistake. It was to garner viewership on a show that had been losing viewers for 4 years since the anniversary special. So they announced it in advance to get eyes on the product. And genuinely, I didn't see the twist coming. I like going back and listening. Yes, I can tell it's his voice. But even back, like the first time I watched it, knowing that John Sim was going to be in the finale, I didn't put together that Razor was the Sim Master. I think it's handled very well. I think the concept of the Cybermen having, or the Mondasian colonists having to change into Cybermen is very, very well realized. And then why don't I like the second half as much? I really like Peter Capaldi. I really like Pearl Mackie. I really like Matt Lucas in this episode. I don't love John Sim in this episode. I don't love Michelle Gomez that much in this episode. I think the Master is a little too campy. I think the writing treats the Master's situation as a joke. I think it relies too much on one-liners and comedy in the first half to really go anywhere. I love all the stuff with Bill as a Cyberman. I like genuinely great writing. This would have been the perfect finale to Series 10 and to the 12th Doctor, and then they had to go and ruin it with Twice Upon a Time. And that's part of why it is dragged down a little bit, because the ending just doesn't quite fit anymore. I love Nardol's dismissal. I don't love Bill's dismissal with Heather, but it is what it is. That being said, that is all I have to say about Series 10. So, in reverse chronological order, 14th place in F tier, we have The Lie of the Land. 13th place, we move up to D tier, Eaters of Light. Number 12, Empress of Mars. Number 11, Knock Knock. Move up to C tier. Number 10, Return of Dr. Mysterio. Number 9, Twice Upon a Time. Number 8, The Pyramid at the End of the World. Move up to B tier. Number 7, Smile. Number 6, The Pilot. Number 5, Thin Ice. Number 4, Oxygen. Move up to A tier. Third place, we have Extremis. Second place, The Doctor Falls. First place for me, World Enough in Time. Let me know what you think of my rankings in the comment section below. I'm sure you disagree with them. Let me know. There should be a link when this video comes to a close in the bottom left hand of the screen with all of my other Doctor Who content. There is a 2-hour-long timeline of the entire chronological timeline of Doctor Who, which I will update with the 60th anniversary special. Happy anniversary to Doctor Who, 60 years. Go celebrate, go watch Doctor Who. It's a great day to be a Doctor Who fan. This time comes around once every 10 years, if we're lucky. If the show is still on in 10 years, I'll be shocked, to be honest with you. But Doctor Who's still kicking, and regardless of where the show is in 10 years, we will always have the show. Whether it be on the air or not, we will always have Doctor Who and what's come before. So join us tomorrow. We'll continue with the 11th series and then go all the way through and eventually rank, of course, the 60th anniversary specials. That being said, that's all for now. Links all the way around me. We'll see you very, very soon.